Listening Fanfiction presents A Friend Flinches Not by Ignium807, part of the If We Must Starve, Let It Be Together series. Narrated for you by Sierra and based on the TV series The Witcher from Netflix. Chapter 1. It's a human that brings him down. Not a monster, not a sorcerer, not even a wild animal. Just a human, and Geralt thinks there's a metaphor in there somewhere, but Jaskier isn't here to point it out. Geralt and Eskel went down the mountain for a final supply run before winter set in for good. The town nearest Kaer Morhen is more tolerant of witchers than most, and their market is admirable for a small place. There is usually a vendor or two who still has fresh produce, limp, but fresh, and better than anything they're going to have for the next few months.
"Stop by the apothecary for my usual order," Vesemir told them. "We need herbs, too, and salt."
"And sweets," Jaskier called, lounging by the fire like a cat who got the cream. He wore his winter silks, a collection of light blues and grey that was seasonal but hardly practical. Geralt added winter coat for Jaskier to his mental list and turned to Lambert.
"Anything for you?"
His brother grinned.
"See what new daggers the blacksmith has. I told him this summer I'd pay extra for anything really interesting, and I'm sure he's thought of something by now."
"Right," Eskel said. "Medicine, herbs, salt, sweets, and interesting knives." Geralt could hear the sigh in his voice. "We'll be back by nightfall." Jaskier tossed him a pouch of coins. Geralt weighed it in his hand with surprise and raised an eyebrow at his bard. "For the candy," Jaskier said. "I've been saving up." Geralt shook his head, but he couldn't keep the fondness from his eyes.
"Nightfall,"
he repeated and followed Eskel out of the hall. They found everything within the hour. Vesemir's apothecary had a bag ready on the counter, a rich mix of poultices and salves for every injury under the sun. Geralt saw that order nearly every year, but this time it contained something new. He took one vial out of the bag and pushed it into the apothecary's hands. It was a common cure for the winter flu, useless to witchers.
"We don't need this one."
It said something about this town that the woman met his eyes without flinching.
"Apologies, Master Pitcher, but the man I spoke with specifically requested it. For your human friend," he said.
Her eyes crinkled on the word friend, but it hardly caught Geralt's notice. He was too busy cramming down the hopeless anxiety that came with the thought of Jaskier getting sick. That winter coat jumped rapidly up his list of priorities. He paid, thanked the apothecary, and swept out of the house. Eskel met him back at the stables. He was lounging against the stall door when Geralt walked in, twirling a dagger with 3 savage teeth cut into the blade and amber pieces patterned in the hilt.
"What's he going to kill with that?"
Geralt asked.
"No idea,"
Eskel shrugged. "But it's definitely interesting." They set off, coin purses empty and saddlebags full. Jaskier's new coat laid across Roach's back like a nobleman's livery. The frigid air whipped through Geralt's hair, and he let his mind drift. It was Jaskier's second winter at the castle, the second year in a row that he traveled not only with Geralt, but with his brothers as well. Navigating that was easier now with the pendants. They came with the obvious benefit of knowing where and how safe Jaskier was at all times, as well as the less obvious but no less welcome benefit of hearing from his brothers far more often than before. Eskel's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Garbled. Smell that?" Geralt turned his nose to the wind and inhaled deeply. There, beneath the crispness of snow and the familiar musk of Roach, was the tang of human blood. He nodded and nudged Roach into a trot. They were halfway to the castle, no place where humans should be bleeding. It wasn't a place where humans should be at all. And Geralt focused in on the scent as much as he could, shoulders slumping when he realized it wasn't Jaskier's.
"What the fuck are humans doing near here?"
"Vesemir mentioned bandits in the area," Eskel said. "Could be related."
"There's no one here to target but us."
Eskel let out a wry laugh. "Never said they were smart." Geralt let out a grunt of frustration. He tuned his senses to the mountain air. Metallic blood, its scent heavy in his nose. Cool breeze on his skin. Whistling. Whistling, and then bright pain as an arrow buried itself deep in his back. He shouted and whirled in Roach's saddle. A second arrow, meant for his heart, slammed into Geralt's chest, a third quick on its heels. Eskel yelled his name as he fell, and then he knew no more. Jaskier, Vesemir, and Lambert feel the impact like a bolt of lightning through their pendants. They're on their feet at once, the witchers running to their weapons as Jaskier clutches his chest, heaves breaths into his constricted lungs, and prays. "Bandits!" Eskel tells them. "Too many for me alone."
On our way,
Lambert replies. He and Vesemir are gone in seconds, horses saddled and swords strapped across their backs as they thunder down the mountain. They disappear through the gate, and Jaskier throws himself into motion. 3 impacts. 3 arrows. That means stitches, disinfecting salve, and bandages. Lots of bandages if the wounds are in Geralt's chest, and boiling water to clean the wound. Painkiller too, something for Geralt to bite down on while Jaskier works. He runs to his rooms and grabs the medical pack he keeps stocked for the road. It's by far the heaviest thing he carries on a daily basis. He has taken great care that Geralt never learn truly how heavy. If his witcher knew the weight of all Jaskier carries for his wounds, well, he would insist they leave some of it behind. An unacceptable choice, in Jaskier's mind. Jaskier knows that for the most part, he's useless. A burden. He's pretty, and he sings well. 2 things which keep them in coin more often than not. But he also complains a lot, gets into fights he can't possibly win, and slows Geralt down with his pesky human needs like sleep. Geralt loves him, that much he knows, but love does not make him less of a burden. It just means Geralt puts up with him more. Medicine, though, is a decidedly useful skill. It's one that does not require strength or fighting ability, just a sharp mind and hours of study. And oh, how Jaskier has studied.
Told him I was playing tamas down the mountain and shucked up with a heater instead.
Jaskier told Vesemir once.
Lovely old lady, quite good at knitting. She took my ear off about tinctures and salves and stitches and the like. I filled the whole notebook.
It was a half-truth, that little speech. Jaskier did spend that winter with a healer, Irene Radford, the top medical mind in Cadwyn. He tracked her down at the king's court and threw himself at her feet, begging for the chance to learn by her side. The cold months passed in a blur of coughs and fevers, every day rising at dawn and sleeping at midnight, the waking hours spent with his nose deep in a book and his hands tending to everything from stab wounds to poisonings. Jaskier left Cadwyn's court just in time to meet Geralt at the base of the mountain and pretend he had been there the entire time. His quest did not end with Radford. Every town they passed through, Jaskier would meet with the local healer. He would offer a song or a helping hand in exchange for a little tutelage. Most village physicians were older women, their histories written deeply into the lines of their faces, long since abandoned by any children, or in the case of elven healers, by the villagers themselves. Jaskier found the women more than willing to share a day with him and teach what they could. It was these meetings, carefully planned so Geralt would never stumble upon them, that grew Jaskier's collection of creams and herbs, that steadied his hand with a needle and turned his once sensitive stomach to iron. If Geralt ever noticed Jaskier's rapid improvement in wound care, he didn't comment. Jaskier would be insulted if not for the fact that Geralt was as observant as a brick wall when it came to his lover. The man didn't notice Jaskier's non-human heritage until over a decade by his side, for Donatelli's sake. He wasn't about to notice something so subtle as a newly acquired skill. Magical healing is always better than human methods, of course, but Yennefer and Ciri are away for the week. Jaskier will have to do. He sits on a rock near the gates and watches the path. No one speaks down the pendants, but that is to be expected. His witchers are silent when they fight, hesitant to reach out in times of vulnerability. Never mind that panic eats its way through Jaskier's bones at the thought of them in need and him unable to help. They're working on it. Time creaks by like a ship on a windless sea. Jaskier can't bring himself to hum or go for his lute. He sits and he watches, and he runs down the list in his mind of every herb in his pouch and what they do, doses, mixtures, how to use what and when and for what kind of wound. It's a practical distraction, he thinks. Geralt would be proud. Hoofbeats echo on the mountainside, and Jaskier's head snaps up. Vesemir appears through the gate, his armor bloody, but his movement fluid. Eskel is behind him, favoring his right side. Lambert is last. Lambert and the body slung across his horse. A body Jaskier knows as well as his own. They dismount and Vesemir goes to Lambert's side, helping him lift Geralt's dead weight into the main hall. Jaskier trails after them.
Get my kit,
Vesemir orders. Lambert moves to obey, but Jaskier cuts him off. No need. He pushes past Lambert to where the others are crouched over Geralt's body. Let me see. Vesemir rounds on him, anger clipping his syllables short.
Now is not the time, Jaskier. Lambert pulls on Jaskier's arm, and Jaskier shakes him off. They don't have time for this. Geralt doesn't have time for this. Geralt is bleeding out. Let me see. This is no place for a bard. Vesemir seethes. It'll be too much for you to handle, and I can't have you in the way. That does our job. Jaskier sees red. Fuck you, he spits. Let you do your job? What job is that exactly, Vesemir? Where the fuck have you been for the last 15 years while I was busy patching him up from all the monsters you sent him out to fight? Jaskier, and don't you dare treat me like some squeamish child. I get covered in blood and guts and all sorts of other shit every other day walking the fucking path with him, and you think I'm going to what, piss my pants and run at the first sight of a nasty wound? Jaskier is shouting now, voice ringing with indignant rage. There are hundreds of fucking scars on his body. Did you know that? I know because I counted. I was there for a lot of them, actually, and the only reason he doesn't have more is because I made him sit the fuck down and let someone help him for once instead of treating himself like a piece of shit the way you taught him to. Vesemir looks a little like he's been slapped, but he's still standing in front of Geralt, and Geralt is still bleeding, and Jaskier is so angry that he can hear the blood pounding through his veins, hard and fast as incoming infantry. Taking care of him is my job! Jaskier brandishes his healer's pack as if to prove his point. He's the only good thing I've ever fucking had, so you are going to step aside, shut the fuck up, and let me help him. Shock flashes bright in Vesemir's eyes, layered there with something darker that looks a lot like respect. He moves away. Jaskier's fingers find the buckles on Geralt's armor and strip him with efficiency. The thick leather is effective against monsters' claws and splashes of poison, but it cuts like butter on the end of an arrow. He brushes the hair from Geralt's face and mutters as he works. Early on, Jaskier was worried his constant chatter would be a source of frustration to his patients, but several healers, and on one memorable occasion Geralt himself, had told him that his voice was grounding. Trouble just can't leave you alone, can it? He asks. Bandits, come on, honestly. Jaskier pulls off the last of Geralt's armor and throws a glance over his shoulder at Eskel, who is hovering behind them and trying to look unconcerned. They're dead, I assume. Eskel nods. Many times over. Lovely. Jaskier pulls a knife from his satchel and puts it to the hem of Geralt's shirt. Geralt, darling, I'm going to cut this off. My hands are plenty steady, as you well know, but please do try not to move. Geralt grunts out assent, and Jaskier beams at him as he cuts the shirt into pieces and pulls the remnants away. He turns his attention to the bare wounds. 3 arrows. One, the first, punched straight through Geralt's chest from the back. A wicked barbed arrowhead juts up a few inches from his heart. The second is just below the first, and the third is buried deep in Geralt's left shoulder. It's a miracle that they're all high enough to miss the vital organs. Jaskier pulls a vial from his pouch and puts it to Geralt's lips. Painkiller, he says. Drink. You don't want to feel it when I pull these out. Geralt swallows the mixture with a grimace. The first arrow will be easiest to deal with. Since the arrowhead is already outside the body, he'll be able to snap it off without any further damage. Lambert, Jaskier says, there's boiling water over the fire. Bring it here, please. Lambert hastens to obey, setting the kettle down on the table and moving to help Jaskier turn Geralt on his side. Jaskier breaks the arrowhead off the shaft and focuses on Geralt's reactions. He'll have to pull the remaining shaft through from the back, which will hurt like a bitch. Ready, Dim? 3, 2... Jaskier pulls the shaft on too, and Geralt flinches with his entire body. He grits his teeth against a scream. Lambert sends him back down, and Jaskier cleans the wound as best he can with wet rags, murmuring soothing words all the while. He rubs on some salve and wraps the whole thing tight enough to bother a normal man. It scared him the first time, afraid the bandages would hurt more than help, but the combination of overbearing pressure and Geralt's slow heartbeat healed the stab wound faster than Jaskier had ever seen. The other 2 arrows will be more of a problem. Barbed heads means that any attempt to pull the arrow free will likely injure Geralt more than the strike itself. The only way Jaskier knows of to dislodge a barb is to cut the wound larger and reach in as carefully as he can to pull it out. Blood and gore he can handle. Screams and monsters, sure, it's all part of the path he chose to walk at Geralt's side. But this, knowingly and purposefully harming Geralt, even if it is the only way to help him, this is what makes Jaskier bite down his bile. You're doing wonderfully, Geralt. It'll be over soon enough, I promise. Jaskier picks up his knife and gestures at Lambert to hold him down. Focus on my voice, love. Just shut your eyes and listen. Let everything else fade out. There you are. Geralt's eyes slide closed and Jaskier angles his knife. 2 quick cuts, one to each side of the arrowhead, then his fingers are in the wound. It's slick and red and horrible. Jaskier wants to scream.
Remember that village, lass, in Redania? The one you saved from a noon wraith?
Jaskier's fingers close around the arrow, and he tugs, quick but precise, careful not to tear the flesh any more than he must.
She slipped me a bottle of beautifully aged whiskey for your services. Kept it in my pack as a surprise for the middle of winter, but I don't think it would hurt anyone if we broke into it early.
The arrowhead clatters when Jaskier drops it against the table. He presses a kiss to Geralt's temple and begins the cleaning process anew. Boiled water, bandages, salve to disinfect, pressure and packing to staunch the blood. Jaskier threads a needle and stitches the wound closed with deft fingers. Geralt shakes through it, groaning and sweating, yet holding himself admirably still.
Thank you, love, Jaskier says. Just one more, then we'll get onto some blankets by the fire and cuddle up. It'll be lovely, Geralt. Just one more.
His hands don't shake as he cuts into Geralt again. The third arrow is in deeper, a hair's breadth from bone. Jaskier has to widen the gash more than he's comfortable with to reach down that far, but his hands do not shake. He won't let them. There is too much blood once the arrow is free. Too much, too soon. But Jaskier takes a deep breath in and holds down a cloth over the wound until the bleeding slows. Water, bandages, salve, stitches, pressure. Prayer. Geralt passes out at some point, and Jaskier is grateful for it. He can't focus for too long on whose body he's touching. Can't think about the blood as Geralt's, or the exposed bone as Geralt's, or the half-screams as Geralt's, because then he might just collapse. The Witcher still twitches when he's unconscious, but he falls completely silent, and Jaskier is able to breathe again. When the final wound is sealed, Jaskier returns to the first. He cleans it again and adds more salve to the stitches, to prevent infection and promote healing, a special combination of herbs and spell work that seems to work particularly well alongside Geralt's mutations. He recovers stitches with fresh bandages and repeats the process on the other 2, rocking back on his heels with a sigh when they're finished to his standards.
We'll need to move him, Jaskier says, but not yet.
He kisses Geralt's temple again and turns to the other Witchers, flicking his fingers at Eskel in a gesture that says, "Sit!"
You next. We can put him in the sick room down the hall as soon as I've seen to your injury.
I'm fine, Eskel says.
Bullshit.
Jaskier snaps at him.
You rode in here, favouring your right side. You're putting all your weight on one leg, and you've got a tick in your left eye that you get when you're in pain. Shut up and sit down.
Eskel sits, stunned. He lifts his shirt when Jaskier urges him to and downs the bottle he's handed without a second thought. Gentle fingers prod at the gash down his left side from the one bandit who managed to land a blow. The bleeding has mostly stopped by now, but Jaskier clucks his tongue and cleans it up anyway. Eskel marvels at how steady his hands are, how meticulous he is without being any more harsh than necessary. It doesn't feel good, but it's a hell of a lot more tolerable than the way he treats his own wounds. Jaskier pulls back and drops a kiss to Eskel's hair. The casual affection burns more than the knife wound. He leans into it, aching.
Eat, sleep, and don't strain yourself,
Jaskier says. Vesemir and Lambert carry Geralt to the sick room under Jaskier's watchful eye. They lay him down gently, careful not to disturb the fresh stitches. Jaskier sits with him for a while, mopping his brow of sweat and generally fussing about the room until his heart slows to its normal pace and Geralt's breathing evens out. He emerges an hour later to find a somber mood hanging heavy over their dinner. Eskel lets Jaskier check on his bandages good-naturedly, though conversation is stilted. Jaskier is uncharacteristically quiet, raising his fork to his mouth with his eyes fixed on the table, an unnamed emotion simmering beneath his skin. He pokes at it, prods at it, worries it until he understands what it is. Guilt. His fork clatters to the ground and the Witcher's heads snap up. Jaskier meets Vesemir's eyes across the table.
I'm sorry,
he says. It's without preamble or expectation. The exact kind of open communication that throws Vesemir for a loop every time.
I was unfair to you earlier. I know how deeply you care about him and all the things you've done for him. All the years you watched out for him before I was even alive and...
He cuts himself off with a bitter laugh and lets his eyes drop to the table.
He wouldn't have survived this long without all you taught him. All of you are the closest thing he has to family. I would never want to discredit that.
Lambert kicks him under the table. We know, idiot! You were scared? You said some shit. It happens.
Jaskier offers him a grateful smile, but he watches Vesemir warily. The eldest Witcher takes a long draught of his ale and sets it down with enough force to rattle the table, though his words come out measured.
Your accusations were not entirely unfounded.
Eskel freezes. He turns his head, slowly. Incredulity written across his face as plainly as shock is written on Jaskier's. Vesemir continues before either of them can interrupt him.
You are not a squeamish bard, he says. That much is clear. If not from today, then from the years you have spent at Geralt's side. As for the rest of it...
Vesemir looks into the fire that burns beside them, the lines on his face accentuated by the flicker of the flame. In this moment, all his years lie heavy in his expression.
Life on the path is dangerous. A slow witcher is a dead witcher, as you well know. I stand by every lesson and every skill I drilled into his bones. He would be dead without them.
Lambert and Eskel nod along. Theirs is a world of monsters and scars. Vesemir taught them how to navigate that world, how to survive the claws of beasts and angry words of men. Those lessons made them who they are.
But I did not teach him gentleness.
Vesemir pins Jaskier with his gaze, sadness swimming just past the steel of his conviction.
You are right, that we do not easily accept kindness. I taught him to survive, nothing more. I would change that, perhaps, if I could, but it is done now. So I thank you for teaching him what I could not.
Jaskier is dumbstruck. He searches blindly for something to say in return as Vesemir rises from his seat, empty dishes in hand.
Witchers are a dying breed,
Vesemir says.
Perhaps it is time for those of us still surviving to learn a little gentleness. If you feel inclined to teach, Bard, I will be honored to listen.
He retreats from the hall before Jaskier can get his brain working again. Lambert and Eskel turn to him with twin expressions of surprise and more than a little pride.
Fucking hell!
Lambert says. Eskel nods agreement. He pokes at the wound in his side in wonder, surprised by how quickly it is healing. Why did you talk to him like that when you were pulling the arrows out? The question snaps Jaskier out of his odd stupor. Like what? Softly. Oh, Jaskier says. It's relaxing.
Relaxing, Lambert echoes. I would like to learn that. To help someone relax.
Warmth bursts through Jaskier's chest right as the fire that blazes at his side. He smiles and runs his hand across Lambert's jaw in a way he knows will make the other men shudder. Tonight is no exception, and Lambert leans into the touch without a blink of hesitation. And I will be happy to teach you. They drag as many blankets and pillows as they can into the sick room surrounding Geralt's bed with a halo of linens and 3 bodies that warm the small space like a furnace. He may wake that night, or the painkiller Jaskier gave him may hold him under until the middle of the next day. It doesn't matter. When Geralt wakes, he will not be alone.